Hello, everyone. So, I am the author of the Teshuva blog. And as you can see, things are going to be a little bit different for this video. And I think for the future, this is kind of how we'll be. I don't know if I'll be doing uh, pictures or paintings anymore. I did that before because I thought it was easier with the audio recording. And also, I was taking care of my daughter and I didn't want to publish her for the world to see. But now that she's getting older and she can go to bed earlier, I now have this time where it can just be me and kind of share my thoughts. So one of the things I'd like to talk about today is this idea of obstructing the Lord's providence in our hands and in our lives, not hands, obstructing the Lord's providence or His um, guidance, His direction, His help in our lives. So I had an experience today where I was taking my daughter to the park and she was on the swing and she is 4 years old and she's learning how to swing. She's a little more timid, but she's doing a good job. And I've been really proud to see her do more challenging things because she tends to be a little more timid and not engage as much at the playground. But anyway, so she got on the swing and she was doing pretty well. We pushed her and she was going. And I was happy to see that she wanted to go faster. Normally she's gripping on to the chains and the seat. She doesn't want to go anywhere. She just kind of wants it to swing back and forth for a period of time and then stop. But she wanted it to keep going, and I was really happy to see that. But what was interesting is she was not doing it correctly. Her rhythm and timing was off when it came to the pump and push motion of swinging, and she was getting frustrated that she wasn't able to go as fast and as high as she wanted to. And I was there telling her, giving her instructions on how to do it, and she wouldn't listen. So she just kept doing it off time, and she was pulling way, she was pulling her legs in as the swing was going down, and then had her feet up and was just going like this, and not really pushing. So she had her, if you can imagine it, legs would be like this, and you're supposed to at this point go down, and then so you get the momentum. And she was doing something more like kind of like this, and then her legs come up, and then she'd come back down like this. So obviously she didn't go that far, and I kept telling her that she needed to reverse her strategy. I kept telling her the timing wasn't working, and she was getting frustrated. She was getting frustrated because she wasn't able to go as fast as she wanted to. Now, what does this have to do with God? What does this have to do with His guidance in our lives and His ability to help us? Well, it has to do with everything because often, and what I've learned in my life is that it's our stubbornness or our refusal to listen is a thing that prevents God from doing all that He can in our lives. So with my daughter, she wanted to go fast in the swing. She wanted to have that experience, but she didn't want to listen to my instruction, and so I couldn't help it. I couldn't do anything anymore. Um, I mean, I even lifted her legs and tried to show her, and she just wasn't getting it and didn't want to, and so she was frustrated. And I just said, "Well, I can't do anything else." And that's the same with God. Is we stand in the way by our refusal to listen to what He wants us to do or being willing to do what He wants us to do. And that's the real meaning of humility. We often, especially those in the LDS Church, tend to think of humility as being self-effacing, kind of limp-wristed, and um, kind of mild, or you know, I guess self-abasing is the right word. Just if we're good at something, we say, "Oh, we're not that good at that," or "Oh, can you play the piano?" "Oh, no, I really can't." "Then you really can. You're really good," and we think that that's being humble. That's actually being dishonest, because if you are good at piano, you should say, "Yeah, I can play. I'm good." And then give that glory to God and play the piano, and then praise God afterwards and show Him the and others the beauty from your ability to play the piano like you do. And imagine someone who's really good at the piano put in time and effort, and they shouldn't have to hide behind the fact that they're good. That's the way it is. They put in that dedication, and they can say, "Yeah, I'm good. I can play." They don't have to hide behind and be self-abasing and tell people they're no good when they really are. So, anyways, we tend to think of humility like that, but that's not what humility is. Humility in the gospel is a willingness to learn, to correct our ways, and to change. Um, and the reason for that goes back to the example of my daughter is and it goes back to how God works with us, is if we are set in our ways, stiff necked, right? That's how the scriptures use it. If we're set in our ways, then when God tries to give us something to help us improve, we reject, we ignore it, we don't listen to it, we disregard it, and then God can't do anything. Just like I can't help my daughter. Like I will not be able to help my daughter with swinging on the swing until she does as I instruct her to do, which is how she's going to be able to swing faster and higher. And so it's the same with God. Is so many of us suffer unnecessarily because we're not willing to fully surrender our viewpoint to God. We think we know, we suffer, but then for some reason we think we know the way out of it, even though we aren't getting out of it because we're still suffering. So if we're still suffering, then we probably don't know the way. And all we're doing is just trying to put a band aid over it. And we distract ourselves with television, um, work, sports, entertainment, whatever it may be. And we just slowly just slog through life. And we just think that that's our burden to carry, um, when it's not. God has given us the ability to overcome the world and to find peace in it. And so if we are struggling and we can't get out of it, it's probably because there's something within us that we don't understand. There's something that um, God is trying to show us, or some character flaw within ourselves that we are ignoring. Either we're ignorant to, or we're willfully disregarding, and God is trying to point that out to us, and we often ignore it. Um, it's interesting after reading this study is that a lot of, I can't remember what exactly it was, but it was something to the fact that um, study after study shows that what brings happiness in life is relationships, finding meaning, um, serving others. Over and over again, sociological studies, psychology is pretty clear on the fact that the way to bring real happiness is thinking outside yourself and finding that um, happiness that is long lasting, which comes from serving others, finding meaning, and so forth. Yet, numerous studies show that people believe that happiness, and I think even in these studies, it's like the people know that happiness doesn't come from wealth or prestige or whatever, but they still seek it. They still desire those things. And they still, for some reason, after all the evidence is out there about what brings real happiness, people still seek the thing that doesn't bring happiness, which is money, um, wealth. Those things don't bring the happiness that the gospel talks about, and that actually leads to that inner peace that the gospel talks about. And so, once again, we have this kind of inconsistency of people, or the evidence is telling us one thing, but the people are doing something different, and they're miserable and they don't know why. And then they have Prozac and Xanax, and they just medicate their lives trying to um, get over it and deal with it when the evidence is clear on what to do. So I think that's what we should really think about, is really introspect in our lives and see whether we are living honestly with God, and whether we're honest with God, and whether we are willing to do whatever he tells us to do. And are there things in our lives that we are not willing to do? God has I mean, it convinced us, but he's convinced us, but he's told us by the Spirit. We know in our hearts what we need to do, and we're not doing it. And if that's the case, then we are going to remain miserable and suffering because we are not doing the thing that's going to alleviate the suffering. We keep doing the thing that's bringing us misery. And I think that's where humility really comes in connection with faith. And I'm pretty sure Moroni says, or Mormon says, that you can't have faith unless you're meek and lowly of heart. And the reason why faith and humility are intertwined is because faith requires action, right? Upon a principle, it's willing to take some step forward, even if the end's not really clear. And humility is required because humility is that mindset to be willing to take the step forward, right? If we're humble, if we realize that we don't know everything and that there's something better out there, then we're willing to maybe take the leap of faith into the dark. We're willing to do something that maybe might be painful, um, because we realize that we don't know anything. And so we're willing to try something new. And so we're willing to take that leap, no matter how painful it might be. But the proud are those who refuse to even step, right? It's just like Moses and the brass serpent. The, just to simply look at the brass serpent, they could be healed. And some people are just like, no, I don't believe it. Can't be that simple. And they died in their unbelief and in their pride. And that's kind of really the distinction, right, between humility and pride is the humble are those who are willing to admit they're wrong and they're willing to seek light and truth and to find a better way. And the proud are those who think they know the way and therefore they stumble, they fall. And so sometimes we get so big and hung up on people's outward appearance and their show of piety. But remember, it really comes down to the heart again. And I've talked about this before, but it really comes down to the heart. And one of those key components is the humble, those who are willing to learn and rely on God and His wisdom, right? It's Proverbs, fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, right? Standing in awe, standing in, well, fear can be awe, but also being like a little fear. I mean, it's that recognition that there is something so much more um, powerful than us, something more above us, um, uh, incomprehensible to us, uh, that we are so minor. We're such a minuscule little thing on this planet, especially in this whole span of God's creation. I mean, you read Job, and God takes Job on this cosmic vision of his creations. And Job realizes, wow, what I thought was so severe is just a little blip in God's whole plan. And so that, and I think even Abraham says the same thing where he realizes, oh no, it's Moses, where after he sees his own cosmic vision of different atoms on different worlds, he realizes, oh man, is nothing, right? And with that, then there's that impetus to then start seeking out the knowledge that we lack. And so I think that's kind of when the scriptures talk about fear of the Lord, it's kind of what they're getting at. I still haven't fully digested that principle, but I think that's at least understanding this idea of awe and in the face of eternity, of the cosmos, of the universe, how expansive it is, and how we're minuscule is kind of gets to that idea of fear. We realize we are nothing, and we turn to God to give us that source in life. But we have to be willing to give up certain preconceptions in order for God to help us. And that's why we focus on the word of wisdom and especially LDS people, which I imagine most of my audience is. But even if you're not, I mean, maybe we focus more on outward things, the words we say and how polite we are, which being nice and kind are good things. But we can do those things, but if we're still stubborn in our ways and stuck and rejecting what the Spirit's teaching us, then we're really not much better because we're going to be stuck. We're not going to be approving. We're going to be staying where we are because we're set in our ways. We have our belief system, and we're not willing to let those be changed. And therefore, we remain in our condition. And sadly, some of us go through these cycles of pain and suffering, and we just think this is just life, and we just have to grin and bear it. Whereas, I mean, it could be the case, and some people have chronic pain, but that's a very different thing because chronic pain is not something that's caused by character flaw, but it could be genetics or an accident. But there's emotional pain, like the anxiety, the depression, mental illness, which is such a um, common thing right now. And people go through these cycles, and some people are just medicating themselves through it and just ignoring it, and they're gonna have their own issues down the line. Um, but then there's that don't, and they just kind of go through the cycle. They find some way to distract themselves, and they have a highs and lows, and distract themselves, and over again they think, oh, that's just life, and that's just my cross to bear. Whereas it's like, well, yeah, it could be, or you have ignored everything the Lord is telling you to do, and you're not willing to change, and you are trying to find another way to feel happy when there's only the way the Lord is telling you. Because if there was a better way, the Lord would take you down that path, because He is all knowing, all supreme, and all loving. He would never take down a path that is not the most beneficial for you. And so if He's telling you to go down the path He's telling you, it's because that is the path you need to go. It's the only way. And I know that from my own experience. I definitely, when I was younger, struggled with depression, anxiety. I was never diagnosed, but I know that I had it. And there were times where I thought I was just bearing my cross and I was being like the faithful. This is just my cross to bear, and I have to deal with these challenges. And that was a bunch of crap. I It's because I didn't want to make the changes I had to make, and I had to go through some hard experiences, and the Lord just really had to put me face to face with my inner demons through experiences, and I had to just accept certain things about myself, things I didn't really want to admit, limitations in my abilities. Um, I really prioritize. I think. Well, I also things never came easy to me, and I always wish that I could be smarter and more intelligent. And um, I deceived myself into thinking that I was smarter than I was, and I had to just come face to face with the fact that I wasn't, and that the only way I was going to advance in life and succeed was trusting in the Lord. And it was really hard for me. It was really hard for me to want to turn over my life to the Lord, because I kind of wanted the Lord there, but then also, being able to think philosophically or think, academically, um, because I thought it sounded smart, and not have to really rely on the Lord on everything, just some things. And it was really a bitter pill to realize that I had to turn over everything to the Lord, and that was not easy. And it was a lot of heartache having to give up my will and my life and my goals and aspirations, um, and put it in the hands of the Lord. But I have done it. The Lord has um, redeemed me from my sins. I've been born again through that. I've given everything I have to the Lord. I do these videos for that reason. I don't know how many people really view it. I don't really care. I do it because it's what I feel impressed. I was going to go to bed, and the Spirit impressed upon me to share this experience. So I did it because I do everything the Lord tells me to do, because I know that everything He tells me to do is for my good. And I know that I know nothing, and that I'm a fool. I'm ignorant. I make mistakes, and I make sure that I don't make them again, and I learn. But I do know that everything the Lord has taught me, I obey, and I do that, and I will always do that, because that's the only source of joy. And my life has gone completely different than the way I thought it would be. The way in college, how I envisioned my career. And what's crazy is that the way I envisioned it, I thought that would bring me joy. And the way that the Lord's taken me, if I knew that in college, I'd been like, oh, that's sadness, that's misery, that's the worst life, worst life. Not worse, I mean, but that wouldn't be. what I envisioned would lead to a happy life. And what's so crazy is I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. I mean, still have challenges in real life. I still have to rely on the Lord, but I don't go this cycle of like anxiety, depression, and then go through these loops and have to distract myself. I don't need entertainment to distract myself. I can just read the scriptures or study the Word and meditate upon His goodness in prayer, and I can go through my life with joy and gratitude for everything He's given me. And so, if you're suffering, if you're struggling, if you feel that the weight of the world is on you, especially those who are dealing with mental illness, mental challenges, such as anxiety, depression, like I did, this might be a hard truth, but there are things that you're doing that are causing that. And if you stop doing those things, listen to your conscience, listen to the Spirit, go to the Lord, and be willing to give up and do whatever He tells you to do, I promise you, you will find happiness and joy, and you will find the peace that the Lord has talked about, that He has promised all His followers. Um, and you don't need to bear this cross, because the cross you're carrying is one that you're choosing to carry on your own. It doesn't need to be as heavy as you're making it. And so those are my thoughts.